right, welcome to another episode of Logicast. My name is Blanca Kong, joined by Gunner Eos, Otto Wolf, and Esoteric Skills. We're well into the new year, but there's still some things from 2024 that I think are worth discussing. So you're probably seeing it on the screen now. There's an article pulled up from The Verge. This article's published October 25th, 2024, and it's titled "Video Game Preservationists have lost a legal fight to study video games remotely. The U.S. Copyright Office won't let libraries lend games for study over the internet." This is mostly for people who want to study video games for work. They actually want to get into video game design, and apparently this was a legal battle for libraries basically lend out video game ROMs and emulators over the internet through like an online infrastructure of some kind. I don't know. I've never used it. I just assume it's like an emulator that they would have through their website. Anyway, let's get into what this is about and why it happened. So, when video game scholars want to study video games that are no longer on sale, they sometimes have to drive many hours to do it legally, and that won't be changing anytime soon. The U.S. Copyright Office has just denied a request from video game preservationists to let libraries, archives, and museums temporarily lend individuals some remotely accessible copies of those works. Kendra Albert, who made the argument on behalf of the Software Preservation Network and Library of Copyright Alliance, says preservationists weren't asking for a lot. It was the thing that basically exists for all kinds of special collections and libraries. The library reviews the request, makes sure it's not harmful, and allows access to the work. When the Copyright Office already lets institutions lend out other forms of media and even software programs remotely, so long as they don't lend out more copies than they own, video games are still treated differently as of today. So some of the other media would be like music, movies, shows, things like that. This is a quote. "It's frustrating that the process that's widely used to access all sorts of different materials is not good enough for video games." Opponents, most prominently, the Entertainment Software Association, the ESA. I don't never knew that. Didn't know that existed. Didn't know it was a thing. Which represents video game publishers, argued that people would take advantage of libraries to play games for free, that they would damage the market for classic video games, and that preservationists didn't have the appropriate tailored restrictions to ensure that the uses would be limited to teaching, research, or scholarship uses. While the preservationists extensively argue that the vast majority of games are never re-released in any form, and that those that are typically changed or remastered in ways that make them less valuable for study, the Library of Congress wasn't conceived. Concluding, the register concludes that the proponents did not show that permitting off-premises access to video games are likely to be non-infringing. So also the notes the greater risk of market harm with removing the video game exemptions premise limitation given the market for legacy video games. Do you guys have any response for this? Or should I keep going?
Yeah, I got a quick response for this.
Okay.
I mean, uh, TLDR, this kind of sucks to say the least. I get the argument. Like, I hear this argument a lot, and I'm not a big fan of it. I was like, oh, well, it's intellectual property, and they could remake the game, and but these people make a very good point. Is that even if they remake a game, or even if they bring a game back from when it first came out, it is usually not the same, whether it is a remaster or a full on remake.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example, and I keep railing about this, so sorry, I guess. Final Fantasy VII. The remake that currently exists is fundamentally from the way it plays, the storyline, and graphically are two different games. You now have the original Final Fantasy and the remake Final Fantasy. So like their argument is sound where they say that even if they do re-release a game, it's usually not a one-to-one carbon copy re-release. It's usually enhanced in some way or from the ground up completely changed. So the merit that they can't study the original game because they could re-release the game in the future. It's to me that's just a bogus claim. That I hate that this argument is used, but it's used a lot. So that's my 2 cents on that little snippet you just covered.
Yeah, I would like to add something as well. It appears that they treat games like the redheaded stepchild. You know, there's always some type of rule that infringes upon games. You know, like games always have to set the tone for, oh, it's too mature, or you know, people who are playing them, kids who are playing them are super influenced by them, as opposed to like movies or shows where they can also be influenced by. And now in this case where they can you know, they can come in and pretty much research shows, music, movies, and whatnot, but games are isolated. It doesn't make any sense. The fact that they're saying that, oh, you can wait till a remaster comes out in print, we'll never know that, because let's say the game that they want to research, it'll probably never get a remaster. So like, who knows? Who knows when this will happen? And what if it's whatever research that they're trying to conduct, what if it's relevant to like some type of comparison that they're making to another game and whatnot? Or let's say, as Gunnar spoke about Final Fantasy, right? Let's say they want to compare the current game to the original. So I just feel like they're just doing this because they want the market to be the way that it is. Like, the market is terrible already. If you know, for those of you who don't collect or whatnot, like, it's really hard to get retro games. Retro games are super expensive, and as you can see, not much of them are in reprint or being remade. There is a handful of games that have been remade, but the vast majority have not yet been made. Um, I also would like to add that I think it's another push indirectly. I don't think like they you know, that they intended to do it, but this is another push to digital media, because of the fact that they probably know about game companies who are creating monthly subscriptions so that you can play these retro games. I know Sony has one, Microsoft has one, and Nintendo has one. And based upon the tiers that you get determines, well, based upon, excuse me, based upon the money that you give will determine what type of tiers you get. Like, for example, I think you have to pay an extra $5 or $10 just to have access to the Nintendo 64 games that they have stored onto the Switch and whatnot. So I think I, I think this is a very bad take. I think, well, a bad decision. Excuse me. They definitely should have allowed them to do some research. And yeah, I'll say more as the article is being read
And
further.
I can agree with Esoteric's point of view when he says that it says that video games is like the, you know, that stepchild that's like, I guess, unwanted, or what was the terminology you used?
Oh, the redheaded
The
stepchild.
the redheaded stepchild.
Yeah.
Because it's like with video games, it seems like they don't take it like a serious topic. Like, if you're a video gamer, you're not to be taken seriously, um or you are just like more of, I guess, a thing, that a media that can just be put to the side, but but yet is held 100% accountable, or held more accountable when something goes wrong in a young adult's or the young adult community lifestyle. Like, for instance, shootings or violent outbursts. That's when video games is then now recognized, because they have a scapegoat for just a person's ill-mannered behavior. But when it comes down to everything else, like, you know, the benefits, or when someone is actually trying to do something good with the video games, then all of a sudden it's, well, it's a media that, we can put that to the side. It's not that important.
Mm-hmm.
But is it not as important as a movie, or is it not as important as a book? In the end of the day, these are creative. It's a creative media. It's creative content, just like everything else. So if it wants to be studied, it should be allowed. It should have the ability to be studied in its purest forms, or whatever video games they want to go back to, and you know reimagine it, and not reimagine it, but revisit it in its normal state. Then you should have the ability to do so. But much like Esoteric said, it's that media that's like, well, we're not going to take this seriously. Oh wait, school shooting happens. Yeah, let's blame a violent video game for that.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like they have blinders on for all the positives that games provide, and they have a magnifying glass for all the negatives that potentially games provide. It's ridiculous.
All right, so I'm gonna keep going here. It's back to the article. It's a quote from the lady who was trying to get this going. I'm gutted by this result. Adding that it seemed the Copyright Office didn't bother to consider the evidence from the video game publishers who testified that gaming limited remote access wouldn't impact the market for their video game re-releases. If the Copyright Office had granted the request, it wouldn't have been a permanent change. Every 3 years, groups get a chance to lobby the Library of Congress for very specific exemptions to Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and those exemptions have to be renewed every 3 years. So again, if they had ruled again, I mean that just means in the next 3 years they could reverse this ruling, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway, the Copyright Office did renew the exemption that lets libraries and institutions preserve video games to begin with and lets individuals play them in person. It also granted an exemption that should finally make it legal to repair busted McDonald's ice cream machines. Um, Here is the actual proposed DMCA exemption that video game preservationists asked for. Video games in the form of computer games embodied in the physical or downloaded formats that have been lawfully acquired as complete games that do not require access to an external computer server for gameplay and that are no longer reasonably available in the commercial marketplace solely for the purpose of preservation of the game in a playable form by an eligible library, archives, or museum, where such activities are carried out without any purpose or direct or indirect commercial advantage. Any electronic distribution, display, or performance made outside of the physical premises of an eligible library, archive, or museum of the works preserved under this paragraph uh, may be made only for a limited time and after the eligible institution acts to ensure that the users seeking off-premises access to works are doing so primarily for the purposes of private study, scholarship, teaching, or research. By one, specifically determining that the user interest is private study, scholarship, teaching, or research. Two, instituting access restrictions appropriate to the nature of the use and the material. And three, notifying the users that they are receiving access to copyrighted material subject to adherence with applicable laws. Here's the ESA statement on its victory. We recognize the importance of preserving video games and protecting game hardware given their significance in culture and society. With today's decision, the U.S. Copyright Office confirms that the current level of video game preservation is appropriate and recognizes that video games present unique copyright concerns that should always be taken into consideration. We thank the Library of Congress and the Copyright Office for the supporting existing copyright protection, which is critical to increasing access to and inspiring new video game experiences for players while also protecting the artists and their creative works. Final paragraph. The Video Game History Foundation has its own statement condemning the ESA's position, including this passage. Unfortunately, lobbying efforts by rights holder groups continue to hold back progress. During a hearing with the Copyright Office, the Entertainment Software Association, the ESA, declared that they would never support remote game access for research purposes under any conditions. The game industry's absolutist position, which the ESA's own members have declined to go on the record to support, forces researchers to explore extra legal methods to access the vast majority of out of print video games that are otherwise unavailable. And then there's some like legal mumbo jumbo. Uh, yeah, that's basically what we already went through up here in the top there. Um, It's basically the final ruling, which, if you couldn't figure it out by now, I don't know what to tell you. So basically, um, this whole court case was really designed to create a convenience for aspiring game designers and just like historians, really, a way to experience out of print video games in the comfort of their own home or office. Um, you can still go to a library or an archive and acquire physical versions of the games you want to play. So that's good, but that could be cumbersome and that could be difficult considering, you know, where you live and where these games or where these libraries are located,
Mm-hmm.
and given the hardware limitations of trying to access older hardware with like a newer TVs and monitors and such. It could be, I mean, it's possible, but it's kind of a pain in the ass. If you could just kind of like log in somewhere and just kind of access the files and just play it on your own computer, that would be less time wasted on trying to find a way to play it and more time invested in the actual study of the subject matter. So
Yeah.
that's really why it's important. Um, and I thought this was an interesting thing to just talk about. And it's interesting you guys, shined a light, mostly, well, all of you guys talked about it, where video games is like the rules are just different for that medium for some reason. And I this is my reason or why I think that is. It's because of money, right? I think video games are just, it's a medium that you can continuously make money off of. It doesn't matter how old it is. You can always go back to it. Whereas music, movies, they kind of have a shelf life. Like the amount of money that Terminator 2 made in the early 90s, they'll never make that amount of money ever again with that particular movie, right? Like they just won't. Even if they release a Terminator 2 special edition Blu-ray set and all this other stuff, like that will sell and that'll make them money, sure. But like it's not gonna even come close to what they made back then, right? But with video games, you absolutely could. If they made a remastered, or even just a port of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo Switch, that could potentially outsell the original sales of the original Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm a sucker that keeps buying it.
Same.
So, yeah. So I think that's why there's all these like we have to protect the integrity of the. It's they don't give a fuck about any of that shit. They just see it as this is a money making opportunity. This is a gold mine that never runs out of gold. So no, we're not going to give anybody any opportunity to take advantage of this. That's why Nintendo was so hard on emulation and all that, because they know what they have and they want to protect it and they want to take advantage of it, even though they're not doing shit with it.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want anybody
Yeah.
else to like at least enjoy it. It's so stupid. So I don't know. I thought this was an interesting topic to just kind of discuss, and I wanted to get your guys' opinions on
Yeah.
it.
So funny enough, what they're making an argument for is literally legal emulation, because that's the same argument that Joe Schmo on the internet will make for emulation. That it's literally I am emulating in some cases my own products. So if I want to emulate my entire 3DS library on a Steam Deck, I should be able to do that because it's my copy. It's my 3DS game. I'm not stealing this from anyone. I'm not robbing Nintendo. I'm literally taking my game, transferring the data onto a better piece of hardware, and I can play it with like all the bells and whistles. That's what these guys wanted to do on a legal level. So they wanted to have emulation of older games, but they want to constrict it like Kong said, like these are in libraries that are in like Washington D.C. and maybe New York, like major cities like that. More than likely D.C. And some guy in Alaska, he's gonna have a hard time getting to D.C. to play a copy of Super Mario Brothers 3. But if he could emulate it from the copy they have in DC, he doesn't own it all of a sudden. He's not going to rip it out of the internet and now he owns Super Mario 3. He's just playing it and goes, "Oh wow, this is what Super Mario 3 was like. That's cool."
But that's how you control it. You control it by making it legal. You don't want people to
Yeah,
do it illegally.
but
Make it
Yeah,
freaking legal.
but
that's the thing. They had to say it in their own argument. We now have to pursue extra legal activities. That's a fancy way of saying we now got to go on Pirate Bay and get an ISO of Super Mario 3 so we can test it, which is technically illegal. How if you want to cut the onion, it is technically illegal to take an ISO that does not belong to you. It is Nintendo's property, and to study Super Mario 3
Hmm.
when if it was officially allowed for them to essentially stream it from the Library of Congress, we'd never even have to think about that. Which is the same
Hmm.
argument that emulators have, and I can't really hate on it. It's like I bought Legend of Zelda. I have I should have the right to emulate that on a Steam Deck. I bought it. I gave you the money X number of years ago. I'm not stealing from you. It's my own copy. But
yeah, I think what it is the fact that they can't monitor the activity that you're doing with said like emulator or whatnot because
They
like
they
they
can't
can't
really
control
control it.
yeah they can't control distribution. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like jaywalking, right? Like that's a crime, but if everybody's doing it, the cops can't control it because of the fact that they can't get everybody who does it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the biggest thing. The fact that they can't control it, they can't monitor the distribution portion of it. That's why they're putting a hold or a damper into like this particular movement. Um, but I have a question. Like, do you think that if physical media was much more like prominent, like than like what how it was back in the days, right? Do you think that they would have been a little more lenient? Because I feel as though that the reason why they're
No,
not is due to the fact that things are becoming digital, which is making it easier for stuff to be transferred to other machines and whatnot, and they want companies to kind of maximize their profit by doing what they're doing currently, which is selling subscriptions in order to play older games and whatnot, play their archives
no,
and stuff.
it wouldn't matter.
Mm,
I don't
okay.
think it would matter. I think even if, let's say, we were to rewind the clock 15 years and it was 2010 was today, right? And this was like a conversation. It would be the same. If anything, they would dig their heels deeper and go, "Whoa, what do you mean digitally access content that you normally couldn't access?" That sounds like stealing to me. I don't think so. You can't have that for study. How can we verify your study? Like this is a circular argument. Like there'll never be a resolution to this particular case because it's all about control,
Hmm.
and there's no real measurable way to know if if let's say I were to try to access these ROMs or whatever through a library, through a digital library, there's no way for them to know whether or not I'm playing for fun or if I'm playing for education.
And
The-
that's what their whole big excuse was. But
yeah,
if I was a movie enthusiast and I had the same privilege, I'm a movie enthusiast, which means watching the movie is is the pleasure
Yeah.
already. So not only am I studying what I like, but I'm taking pleasure into it. So isn't that not the same thing?
Yeah, it's two
Isn't
sides
it
of the
not the
same
same
coin.
thing if I like for and that can go to any field. Like for example, people who like numbers, they're accountants. Become an accountant. Are you not enjoying it? You go studying accountant
is that a
and you enjoy it?
smile? Why are you using that calculator? Yo, get this motherfucker right now. What are we even talking about right
But it's
now?
the same logic. That's like you're punishing someone for wanting to study content that they enjoy. That's horrible, in my personal opinion. And in the end of the day, there are people who become certain professions that they have to study, not because they really per se doing it for educational purposes, but for some other type of, own selfish gain, whether it's the amount of money that they can bring in, or the fact that they can escape from reality, or, or it's easy for them to do because, it's not as hard as other jobs. Or some people are antisocial people who don't want to go to a library because they don't want to catch certain diseases. They're paranoid that way, or they're just antisocial, and being around people gives them anxiety. Though it's so many different variables, and people are just so different on day-to-day basis. So you using the whole excuse of, well, how do we know you're really going to study video games? To me, it's like a child that's trying to win an argument with his bigger sibling, or a low hanging fruit kind of excuse to not give somebody something they want, or something you feel like they feel like they can benefit from. It's just bullshit.
Mm.
Well, the
Look,
other thing too is that they're defending, and I'll let you go real quick.
mm,
I just want to make sure this is out there. Um, their other point of contention is because, in their opinion, the ESA, they claim that there isn't that they don't have the infrastructure to put a limitation on it. So that leads me to believe that a bunch of people could access the same ROM across the country, across the world, maybe at the same time. And so that's their big problem with it. Even though apparently they had testimonies from publishers like maybe EA or Activision or Capcom or Microsoft, whoever, that said, nah, that won't be a problem. Even though they have those testimonies, they're still like, no, but you can't limit this. You can't close the flood. So no, yeah, I don't care about the testimonies. Fuck you. No. So
oh,
that's
yeah.
that's the other problem too. But go ahead, Gunner.
No, no,
I
no.
know you
You
had a
you brought up what I
response.
was gonna bring about. Like I was looking in the article about how they had evidence from video game publishers, probably not Ubisoft because they're scumbags. Um, that testified that it's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to play Metroid, it's not gonna really hinder us if we want to make a new Metroid. Look, we're doing it right now, and it's gonna sell like hotcakes. But yeah, I mean, I guess the ESA was just like, yeah, but nah. And it's like, okay, when you literally have the right, technically the rights holders of these games testifying that, yeah, if you allow people to play snippets of our game that is literally localized to one central building, and fundamentally they are streaming this game, then it's not gonna tank our business. We're not going bankrupt off of this because if we release a HD um, you know, uh, 4K version, it's gonna sell. I mean, Sony's doing it with The Last of Us 20,000 times. Do you think if the Library of Congress had access to the original PlayStation 3 Last of Us, it's somehow gonna hurt sales of any future remakes? No, it wouldn't. And I just find it interesting that they actually got testimonials from video game publishers. They don't name them, but I imagine these are like, semi big names or impactful names, and it didn't even matter. So like when you have the party that could potentially be aggrieved tell you, nah, it's not a big deal, and you still say fuck you, it's like, well, that's government for you. Give them all the evidence and like, nah, I see that and I say no.
Because it's taken out of their control. It's taken out of their what they want. So they're gonna do their best to omit um, whatever is gonna make the case valid.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just want to revisit Kong's point about movie and like or your guys' points about why video games somehow get like different treatment than movies. My personal take on that is more than likely it's because movies are kind of they're snapshots of particular moments and people in time. So like to use the example of Terminator 2, that's when Arnold Schwarzenegger was like in his heyday and like, he was like the action star. You come around 30 years from now, people aren't even going to know who Arnold is. They're like, "What's that? I don't know who he is." So like I think movies get more of a preservation cuz it's just like, well, these were the big names or these were the iconic actors and actresses in a movie in this particular century or this particular decade. Whereas a video game, one, it's seen as kids' entertainment still by a lot of people. And two, it's just like, well, Mario's Mario is Mario. Mario from 20 years ago is the same Mario that's running around in Mario Kart 8. So like it's hard to kind of gauge time when actors age and die and essentially Mario lasts forever.
So with that, Gunner, I have a question too, and this is for all you guys here. Could it also be that the reason why they treat games the way that they do is due to the fact that with games you have a direct interaction with that media, like you choose what the character does, you make the decisions for the character, so they kind of think that, because okay, with movies the only interaction you have is that you're observing it. With games, you have to decide based upon what the character can do. You have to decide what you want that character to do. So, like, let's say, for example, um, those games that you have where you make choices. You have a good decision or a bad decision, and you choose the bad decision. So that kind of might force them to say, "Oh, well, it's causing people out in the real world to make bad decisions because they made this bad decision in the video game." Is that why they're a little apprehensive as well as to why they treat
No,
games in the way
I
that?
I don't think so. I don't think it's that deep. I think it's really video games and the gaming industry as a whole is worth more money than the music industry, the movie industry, and the television industry combined.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing
It's all
to
about
it
money and control. That's what I think. Go ahead.
that I agree with your point on that as well. Um, but okay, hmm. I know this may be a sensitive topic for some if they are listening, but
I'm already
column
offended.
when I did my research paper for school, um, on gun control, I found out that Columbine happened in April 1999, right? And I was old enough to understand that at that moment, um, video games did take a hit in certain aspect because they were blamed or they wanted to put into some kind of stance on video games for violent acts. But The Matrix came out a whole month before Columbine happened, and those two boys was dressed in black trench coats with sunglasses. But no one ever pointed that out. Now that's just a self observation, of course. It doesn't mean that the Matrix should be blamed for those boys' actions. I don't think it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that if you're going to pin it on one content, pin it on all content across the board. Even if Arnold Schwarzenegger is just an actor for the moment, in the end of the day, he was a giant robot running around with a shotgun on a motorcycle. Yes, killing or protecting someone from evil robots, but it's still a violent movie. There was still bullets flying. People still got killed. Like it doesn't matter on the in my personal opinion, it doesn't matter on the content that the actor or the time of the actor's high rise. It matters on the content of the movie that they were in, much like the music, right? We know that Eminem took a lot of heat as a rapper in his day and age because of the um the amount of, I guess, derogatory words that he would use or lingo that he would use. But at the end of the day, no one is really getting at other music or other artists who use derogatory words in their content. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's all the same shit in the end of the day. Like we got to stop. I feel like when it comes to video games, it's easy to point the finger because it's a market that doesn't have enough backing in this particular culture. Like I
Yeah,
feel
no,
like
I mean, you're
here
not
in the
wrong.
West,
Yeah.
here in the West, I feel like we don't back video games like that, but movies and music and television we will support.
Yeah, because
But go ahead.
uh, movies are like Hollywood. That's U.S. That's our thing. We for a long time anyway, not so much anymore. We led the world when it came to entertainment. Like some guy in Bangladesh and some guy in Timbuktu is watching Terminator 2 and he's like, "Oh, this action film that came from America." So I think this also ties into like the government and it being run by dinosaurs, like they understand movies. They don't really understand games. Like they see games and they go, "Oh, Pong and Tetris, the thing that goes beep bop boop on the CRT." Like they don't get it. And that's why, God help me, I hope we get some younger people at some point. Like I'm not asking for Zoomers with the broccoli haircut, but if we can get some 30-year-olds, please, like, fuck. Um, but like I think
Mm.
that's why movies get the higher pedestal, because you're right. That's our thing. That's like, we understand that as a Western culture, because we created the idea, not movies, but we created the idea of American movies and spread it around the world. Whereas video games mostly they originate from the East, from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
always been foreign to a lot of Americans. It's like, it's not foreign to us. Like, some of us prefer video games over movies. But to a lot of our seniors, people in
Mhm.
their 50s, their 60s, and 70s, because would you believe it? They're still in government. I'm sorry, I'm getting off at a tangent. They you know they don't understand it like we understand it, but they understand movies. So I do think that's a point that deserves to be brought up, because it's a valid insight, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Gunner. It just sucks that games get such a bad rap and get treated in such a bad way because there's so many studies that are out where they state that video games improve your cognitive thinking. It helps with your hand-eye coordination. It's so many other like positives that are associated with games, and yet they still get treated the way that they do. Like, it's more in this day and age, it's like more productive to play a video game than it is to watch a movie or watch a series of shows and whatnot. Because you're actually having that full on interaction. You're solving puzzles. You're trying to figure out what's happening. You're understanding a story that's unfolding. You're customizing your character to overcome certain like obstacles in its path, and it's just crazy how you know not just the dinosaurs as gonna cause them, but there's so many people who are around our age, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger, that still don't understand games. Like, or it's not that they don't um, understand games, it's just that they don't want to understand games. You know what I'm saying? Um, it just sucks. You can't even review a game for historical purposes, for research purposes, because they want to hold on to it. And it's like this game, like I'm pretty sure uh, Dig Dug or whatever is never going to get another release or something like that. Probably in its purest form or whatever. They're probably gonna update it. Um, I mean, the game Donkey Kong, the original one with when Mario was named Jumpman, that had a revamp like 6 times. So it's like, what the hell, man? It's just ridiculous. It's yeah.
Well, what's your so are you like what are you arguing for exactly with that? Like it sucks that video games are looked down upon on a cultural level. I mean, it's improved since we were younger.
Oh yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
gotten better.
Yeah.
Um but I mean, so are you talking about the court case with like being able to study video games remotely? I
Uh,
might have to make a change there.
yeah, I did. Oh,
Oh,
he's back.
all right, change back.
Okay.
So
Um,
like what exactly are you like attacking? Because it sounds like you're attacking it from a position of like defending emulation for entertainment purposes.
well, it wasn't just I wasn't defending like emulation purposes or anything like that.
I'm not against you.
Oh no
I
no
just
no.
want clarification.
I will say
Yeah.
that I am for emulation because I feel if you purchase the item that you should be able to do whatever you want with said item. That's where I side. But I was speaking more so on like the acceptance of video games. I kind of went off on a tangent there, like how games are providing so much positives in you know people who utilize them lives, and scientifically speaking how it improves As I stated, the cognitive thinking, the hand-eye coordinations, and things of that nature. And it just sucks that the masses, for the most part, will oversee that and just say, well, games are bad and so on and so forth. It did get heavily accepted much later on in the years, but there's still a vast majority of people who still thinks that games are a waste of time. So I kind of went off a tangent of the topic. So.
Well, I'd have to agree that games are a waste of time. Everything's a waste of time if you want to frame it a certain way. Like you can say that about almost anything.
Yeah,
Um,
true, but
right? Why are you reading that book? You should be going out making money or
And that's
lifting weights.
right.
Like it depends on like the framing that you put it in and the perspective of the person
Yeah,
that's
it's I was
labeling
saying
it as
it's
a
the
waste of time.
perspective. Yeah.
no, that
So
that's true. But
Hmm.
like, if you were to like categorize everything, people will be more accepted of someone reading a book because they're acquiring knowledge. They would never think
not
to.
true. There are plenty of books that have no knowledge in it. There's plenty of empty books that had just
I
No,
have
no,
a
you're
don't
shitty
absolutely right, but
see
it's just
like
fictional
the.
I don't
plot.
see the educational aspect of of a book that's about sex or romance in a sense. Um, but
That
yet people read those genres for entertainment. Regardless, it's a form of entertainment and they're enjoying it. You
Absolutely,
know.
but it's more people will overlook someone reading those books. Like, let's say we're on a train. People will overlook someone reading a book like that and complain about somebody playing a Nintendo Switch. They'll scoff at the Nintendo
You're
Switch and
you're
they'll say.
100% correct.
So I
Yeah.
understand that it's all based on perspective. However, with majority, like, people will not associate games because there is some positives that are associated with it. And yes, everything that you do can potentially be a waste of time. However, how people would look upon those things, video games would potentially be at the bottom of the barrel. Like, they would associate it with no positive
So
properties whatsoever.
I agree with you. I'm not arguing against
Yeah.
you per se. I agree with you. However, I'm just gonna say it, and it's gonna sound fucked up. And if somebody's offended, then that sounds like a you problem.
Mm-hmm.
People like that are either ignorant, like they just don't understand it, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. Like it's like you don't get it. Okay, there's room to learn, or they're just retarded. Like they're just stuck in their ways and
Mm-hmm.
they're fucking moronic. It's
Oh
really
yeah.
that simple
Oh yeah.
because you could apply that logic to anything. So if
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
reading a book about nothing, people see that as more productive for two reasons. Reason number one is legacy. Books have been around a hell of a lot longer than anything else.
Yeah.
Reason number two is that
Mm-hmm.
you're exercising your ability to read. And so that is a generic, well, today is a generic skill for the most part. Um, that is a skill. It's like, okay, he's reading. That's not something that people do for fun most of the time. People read for to gain knowledge. A lot of people read for fun, but a lot more, I think more people don't read for fun, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
depends on what you're reading, determining that, which can determine whether it's a fun read or not.
Yeah.
And then with
Mm-hmm.
video games, there are absolutely mindless video games that take little to no critical thinking at all. Like you're just
Yep.
mindlessly jumping or mindlessly shooting at something, right? Where there are
Mm.
plenty of games that will really test your ability to think critically, your ability to problem solve, your ability to solve problems, your ability to execute a series of actions, whatever it may be. But that's so nuanced to the in the eyes of someone who just doesn't understand it
Yeah.
or who has
Yeah.
never engaged with it. So right? Like if you're watching a fighting game bout between two pro players, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like levels to it, levels of complexity to the gameplay.
Yeah.
That level of gameplay between two, you know, l- pro players labeled pro players, um, that's like a different level of like playing and understanding the game that I couldn't even exist in. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's me. I understand that, and I can see that. It's the Dunning Kruger effect. It's like the more you know about something, the less you know. Like the more you understand something, it's like fuck. You start to realize like I don't know shit about this really.
Yeah.
Like you start
Yeah.
to really see the vastness of like how deep that particular subject matter is. Whereas if you know a few things, oh, I know. You kind of have like this weird delusion of like I understand all of it, and that's
Yeah.
kind of like what Gunnar was saying with government officials and like they just see video games as like this weird, fucking brain dead activity that like it's like, oh, that's all video games are like that. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. But they will never know that because they're in that beginning phase of the Dunning Kruger. They once they learn more about it and they actually study it a little bit, their minds will open up if they're willing to go that far.
Yeah.
Which obviously they're not. So it's a moot point. We might as well wait till they just fucking croak, and then
Nah,
you know.
it's straight up, man. It's straight up. Like they just won't get it. Like I can see this guy's frustration. It's like, bro, we're not trying to just fucking give out free games to the masses so Nintendo doesn't get money anymore. Like we're trying to just learn from these games and like study how they were able to make this with the limited technology of the time. Like that's what they want the video games for, and they want other people to experience it. Like, like, oh well, you're playing Marvel Rivals, but this is how video games started. This is where it started, so you can get to Marvel Rivals.
Yeah.
And if someone can't play that to get a hands-on experience with it, they just won't understand it, and video games will stay as this child mind rot brainless activity, which, Khan is right, there are definitely games like that, but there are other games, even Marvel Rivals, for example. I bring it up, like, that demands a lot out of you at any given time. It's not just like, you know a mindless hack and slash or a beat 'em up or a shooter or something like that. But if people can't learn about the origins of something, it's like if you couldn't learn the origins of film and filmmaking and particular camera work, and it's like, well, this is how George Lucas revolutionized this, cinematography, because he used a different filming style that was never used before. If we
Mhm.
had that same mentality that they have for video games and movies, people wouldn't know about it, because Disney would be like, "Oh, well, we can't show that to people. No, you can't watch that particular scene in Star Wars, because people might just steal it and play it on loop at their house." It's it's, it's stupid mentality for the same medium, but video games has come a long way, but it is still not seen as something that is worth preserving and, you know s- you know disseminating to the masses. It's not seen as that, and I hope it one day gets to that. But as we could see, it's not here. And also, real quick, that system where you got to like redo this petition every 3 years, God bless, is that tedious? Like, you get 3 years of like study, and then, you know 3 years later there could be a new administration. It's like, fuck video games, they suck. And then you gotta wait for like a new administration to roll in. It's like, all right, we're a little bit more nuanced on video games. Like, that must be tedious. God bless.
But here's my question too, right? If you guys, well, never mind. Because what I was gonna ask was, if they feel so like blah about video games, then why are they archiving them to begin with? You know what I'm saying? But then again, it all goes back to,
Well,
as we stated, was the
they've said in that short read that we had
mhm.
that they appreciate and they understand that it has a cultural impact and importance. So they understand it. Their position is the reason why they won't allow this particular um, action to take place, where you can basically rent video games digitally over the internet,
Distribution.
um, is because they want to protect the economical opportunities that those classic video games still can provide those companies that publish them. That's one. Two is that apparently the museums and archive, you know, institutions don't have an infrastructure they deem good enough to actually put like real hard limitations on, you know, blending out these particular ROMs. So that's really why they're against it, is that they're afraid that it's going to be taken advantage of, and it's going to hurt the free market of video games and hurt the publishers that actually produce these games, even though these games are 40 years old. But like that's their stance, and I can understand it. I get it, because once you open Pandora's box, ain't no going back, right? That's with a lot of things, and this is one of those things. So I get it, but I think it's so like pig-headed, and it's like,
It is because
would you even have testimonies from the? That's the part that
Right. That
gets me. It's
that's
like
the thing.
you have
Yeah. Yeah.
you have testimony from publishers, and they're like, yeah, I hear you, but I don't care.
because
We're gonna stick to the ruling that we're gonna stick to, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
It's
and
it's like,
Here's the thing, right? This is what kind of pisses me off about it, because the simple fact that if they're concerned about distributions, right? There's no hold on the other medias where we've all seen it. We've seen people walking down the street selling bootleg DVDs of movies even before they came out. We've also seen big name apps like Kazaa and LimeWire come out where people were just downloading music all day and whatnot. I think some of them you can possibly download movies as well. But like games, it's like, we need to kind of put a hold on this. I mean, they remake
This goes back to
movies.
what I said before.
No, I know.
Video
Control,
games
yeah.
is worth way more money. That
Yeah.
it's worth way more money, and that's the only reason. I can promise you that in an alternate timeline, if video games was still worth the same amount of money it was worth 30 years ago, it wouldn't this wouldn't even be a conversation. They would not give a fuck. Because it's not there's no money. So it's like, who cares? Does it what it's worth nothing. Get who gives a fuck? Let them play the who cares? Let them it doesn't matter to us. That's why. That's why. That's the other reason on the other side of the coin why it's always attacked um, for like political points or whatever is because it's an easy target. It's the fish that always rises up first. So it's the fish they're gonna
Yeah.
grab first. That's why it's like, oh, there's a school shooting. Well, let's target video games because whatever. Like it's just an easy scapegoat. Like Wolf was saying, it's the scapegoat that's the easiest to target for a shot, but it's also the goat that produces the richest and best milk. It it's crazy, but both of those things are true at the same time. And one is more true than the other or more prominent than the other depending on the day. Depending on today, what do we need today? Do we need a scapegoat or do we need milk? Because this particular goat can produce both.
Yeah.
That's what it is, and it's fucked up and it's hypocritical. But these are the people who are in power.
Yeah.
It just is what it's something we just have to accept. And no system can be perfect. There's always going to be flaws, and
Yeah.
human beings are
Biases.
flawed.
Yeah.
So the systems we produce will be flawed in one way or another, for better or for worse.
True.
Well, good luck in 3 years' time, guys. You got another shot.
Well, I mean, on the bright side, I mean, yeah, that's a bit annoying, but at least they have time to reattempt, you know, the idea and pitch it to them. You know what I'm saying? It's going to suck that it's
I'm
probably the
just
same
glad
people there, but
that preservationists still exist. I'm glad that
Yeah,
they're
word.
as passionate as they are, and I will anybody who listens to this, whether you listen to it on the day that it comes up on our YouTube channel, or if you listen to it 10 years from now, because it'll still be here probably. Hopefully, we'll see.
yeah,
Physical media is so important because physical media is the last line of defense that we have as consumers against these tyrannical fucking power hungry dumbass motherfuckers, whether that be the publisher, the people, executives in the publishers, or people in government or whoever. This is all we have. It's like our Second Amendment right in the United States. We have to protect it because if we don't, the moment
the
every
right to
time
be a
you
physical media.
every time you download a game or like you participate in like the modern gaming sphere, you're that's just another log in the fire for them to just take over because once it goes all digital, it's a wrap.
Yeah,
Like all rights, all ground you have to stand on is gone. It's gone. And that's why they want to that's why they're so they being Sony, Microsoft, even Nintendo to a lesser degree, they're so hinged on like, man, we're saving so much money with digital, like this is the way to go because that's just the short term you know thinking of like, well, shit, we're making more money now, how is this a bad thing, let's keep going, we're gonna make our money either way, and we're getting fucked at the end of it, and they don't particularly care because it's like, well, the consumers are gonna consume because that's what they do. Humans are adaptable, and it's true. Like we're just
yeah,
gonna adapt to whatever changes that they put forth in front of us, and so we have to kind of have enough self control and enough foresight to be like, hold on a second, like wait, is this a smart idea? Am I fucking myself here? Like, yeah, stop and ask yourself those questions, because if you don't and you just kind of go off the whims of convenience, and they're counting on that shit because most people are susceptible to that. If you just go off the whims of convenience, eventually we'll have nothing, and
Yeah.
we'll just be sitting here and like we're already doing it. We're paying premiums for the same content over and over and over
Yeah.
again, and it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is, and it'll continue. The pendulum will continue to swing toward the other side, the dark timeline. It's going to continue going that way as long as we as a collective continue to consume, and we don't like police the way that we participate in this space. We're going to get fucked over at the end.
Yeah.
But I
You're
think it's inevitable,
you're
unfortunately.
you're absolutely right. I always say this. There's a price for convenience. I mean, it's always been an ongoing trend. Before Netflix, there was Blockbuster, and then what happened to Blockbuster? Then you have Amazon, and then now Amazon. Look how many stores are closing down and whatnot. And then now,
Exactly.
it's always this trickle effect. It's
Yeah,
always a
like
trickle effect.
Amazon, big companies like Amazon and all these other places. You're gonna have to
Yeah, I fixed
make
it.
this switch. You got it. Um, they make these. They undercut. First, okay, so it's funny how like the whole big fish eating the smaller fish, and then another big fish eats that big fish. Like that's just life, really. But like it's funny to see it in business over the last 30 years, where like let's use GameStop for example. GameStop in the 2000s started consuming all of these smaller like gaming stores and mom and pop stores and Rhino games, and they were just like eating up the market, just pack banning and that shit, right? Just chomping away, right? And it became this giant fucking company, and then the industry changed, and now it's like cannibalizing it. It's they're getting eaten up because there's a bigger fish in the form of digital distribution and Amazon and all these other like multiple fish. It's not just one fish, it's
Hmm.
multiple fish chomping away at GameStop. And it's like, damn, like look at that, right? Like every dog has its day. And so now people, I see it on Reddit right now, GameStops are closing, right? Which this is about 2 3 years late, really. Games This should have been happening in 2021, but it's happening now because of the meme stocks in 2020 and 2021. But people are sad, like, oh man, my childhood GameStop is closing. Oh man, this is so sad. And it's like, it is sad, but how many of those people, I would love to know how many of those people are digital consumers now. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you you contributed to this death. Like, and,
Yeah.
and and some people will say, well, GameStop wasn't exactly, this holier than now company. They fucked a lot of people over. True.
Yeah.
But
They weren't the
which would you
big bad.
prefer? Which demon, which devil really would you prefer? Would you prefer to have GameStop kind of undercut you and pay you 30 to 40% value on your games? Or would you rather a reality where everything is digital, you own nothing, and it could be ripped away from you at any time for any reason without question or consequence?
Yep.
I'd rather the GameStop model,
Yeah.
honestly. I'd rather get kind of dicked over on trade values than just have no type of real ownership on like the stuff that I'm consuming. That shit sucks.
Yeah.
I'd rather that.
But
You
at
know what I
least,
mean? So like,
but at
good.
least on the bright side, GameStop was inadvertently doing a service while doing a disservice, because at least while they were getting games traded in by customers, and dicking them over with what they could have given them for their games, at least there was availability for those games for other consumers to come in and say like, oh, I haven't played this yet, let me buy it used. As opposed to now where you're going to some mom and pop shop, or you're going to someone online and they're selling the game for like hundreds of dollars. At least GameStop didn't dick us over in that regard.
Well, it's gonna be even worse than
Oh
that
yeah, yeah,
because
absolutely.
with the digital only model, publishers have full control.
Hmm.
Publishers and storefronts have full control over the pricing, the availability, the just everything, right?
Yeah.
And so if they're just going to take something, if the license expires for a particular game or whatever, or an IP, they just take the game off the store. Like I was um a family member was asking me about like they wanted to play a Mickey Mouse game. I was like, like a platformer Mickey Mouse game, because they played Disney Illusion or
Yeah,
whatever on Switch, and
yeah.
they really liked it. And you know, it was like a Castlevania,
World of Illusions, I think it was called.
Metrovania like Mickey Mouse game.
Hmm.
And so I was like, you know what game's really good? Castle of Illusion on Sega Genesis, which got remade in like 2008 or something like that and it was on
Hmm.
PS3 and 360 and all these other platforms. And I was like, oh shit, I think you could probably just download that version of the game, right? Because it's basically the Sega Genesis game, but you know, updated graphics or whatever.
Yep.
And that game is no longer available. It's just gone. It's just gone to time because the license expired. And I think Sega's the one who made it or published it or whatever. They didn't want to renew the license because it's like, well, we're not making money off this game anymore. It's
Yeah.
like it's on dead platforms, so it's like, why renew the license? So they didn't renew it. Now it's gone. It's just gone to time. I have it on my PS3 here because it's on my profile, but like if I wanted to re-download it on another console, or if,
Yeah.
God forbid my PlayStation 3, this particular one that it's on, dies for some reason, and I have to like change out the hard drive, then I lose the game, right?
Yeah.
Same thing happened to Marvel vs. Capcom. So it's like that's bad. that and if they made a physical copy of it, I would just own that and be like, oh, well, it is what it is. Like I have a physical copy, so it's fine, right? But we don't have that for that particular game because they didn't do that. They didn't physically make one, and so now it's like now it's subject to just being lost to time. And I'm sure that there's like a ROM out there, and I'm sure there's ways to get access to it because there are people who are a lot smarter than me and backed up the ROM, and it exists on a server somewhere, and that's on a backup drive, and that backup drive is on a backup drive. So like there's like a bunch of contingencies in place, which is great, but it those contingencies shouldn't be like the go-to solution. Those should just stay as contingencies.
Yeah.
There should be other like simpler solutions available to us, and they're not because it's like it boils down to fucking money and control. So
Yeah.
anyway, sorry, that was a rant, but
No, it was good. I mean, and that gets into the extra legal part that they mentioned in the article, because now if you wanted to play that Mickey game and you got to go to the guy who has the server, now you're getting into that murky gray area of like, well, are you guys,
Distribution.
yeah, are you distributing material that isn't yours? Which these guys are like, well, if we have it in an official government capacity, nobody could say anything because not many people are going to rock up on daddy government and say, well, you can't play Tetris. So that's what they're trying to do. And now they admit that they might have to go down these avenues in order to kind of have preserved copies of these games, which, hey, do what you got to do. I'm not confirming or denying. Do what you got to do. Because if people like these guys don't exist trying to preserve these games, they will be lost forever. And until movies get the same treatment as video games and music, sorry, reverse that. Until these video games get the same treatment as movies and music,
Hmm.
we're gonna be stuck in this situation on repeat for ad nauseum. So do what you gotta do.
Yep. I agree. I absolutely
so
agree.
I think we're out of time, right, Esoteric?
Yes, we are out of time. So, with that being said, this was definitely a great article. I enjoyed it. It was definitely super enlightening. I want to thank Blanca Kong for distributing, that's the word today, this article to us
I am the
putting
government.
and allowing us to put some eyes on it. Um, very, very interesting read. What do you guys think in the comment section? Let us know. Are you for the preservationists? Were there some angles that the I forgot the name of the company or who preserves?
ESA.
Yes,
Well, there's
ES.
ESA.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the Preservationist Company, and then
Okay.
there's like the Office of Congress. There's like a few different factions that are in this battle here.
Okay, so let us know what faction you side with, guys. They'll all be listed below. Um, what angle do you think that you can kind of contribute to this conversation that we might have missed? Are you for the preservations of games and allowing the preservationists to have access to those games in which to research? Or are you for the government who are restricting these accesses because they feel like if you were to take one, then someone will kind of take advantage of that and distribute it to everyone else. Let us know in the comments. Also, I want to take a time to shout out all the panelists here. Wolf, who had to step out for some personal things going on, Blanca Kong, and Gunna Eos. Huge, wonderful conversation. I already said that, whatever. Um, with that being said, moving forward, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel. We put out a episode every Wednesday at 12 p.m. EST. So be sure to check it out. Hit that bell notification so you'll be notified as to when we put those out, should you be working or just tend to forget. And also, check out our social media platforms. We have all the social medias listed right below us. We also have the Twitch as well under the same handle, Logical Gamers TV. They will also be in the description down below as well. So again, once again, thank you guys so much. The panelists, y'all have a wonderful rest of your night. And last but certainly not least, if it ain't gaming, it ain't logical, folks. Peace.
Bye. You can't see me.